All right. I can be one. Good morning. All right. If you can, go ahead and turn to John 18. John chapter 18. And right now what's happening here is that Jesus has just finished inside of the Gospel of John, the high priestly prayer. And then, for whatever reason, John just kind of makes a statement about the Garden of Gethsemane and then goes on. Whereas we know from Matthew, Mark, and Luke, there's a lot more in that section than what's in John. And John is trying to take us right to the arrest of Jesus. And so then you have John 18, verse 3. And you see Judas coming there with the Roman detachment of troops and the temple guard of the chief priests and Pharisees there, the Jews. And then verse 4 of John 18 says, Jesus, therefore, knowing all these things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, whom are you seeking? Now, verse 4, and this is where we're picking up here, is that you have two ways to look at the word know, K-N-O-W, okay? The first way is dealing with the knowledge of something. That's the word gnosko. In fact, there was a group of people that are still around in certain sections, I guess, called the Gnostics, okay? And that's the ones that say we have extra knowledge and we have extra wisdom that's beyond what's written. And that's all false. But they use that idea there from the word gnosko, to know things, to know facts and information and things. So, but the word used here is not that word. It's not the idea of knowing the facts. It's the idea of knowing by experience. It's the word oida. Okay? So Jesus here, when it says when the Gospel of John says, knowing all these things, it's saying he's already experienced these things in his mind, in his will, if you will. Okay? He already knows why he's come into the earth, is to be crucified. And so you think about it from Revelation 1, where it says that Jesus was the lamb that was slain before the world's foundation. He already knew what he had to experience. You see it in Isaiah 53 there with that suffering servant. You see it dealing with the lamb who was silent before his shearers. He already knew what was going to happen. So you see that word oida here. It's not just the idea of knowing a fact. It's the idea of knowing things by the experiencing of these things. Okay? And he knew all these things. He was already there. He's already gone to that point. And the idea of it being discussed like this, with this future action in spite of a present, inside of a past tense here, is the idea then that if God says something, it's already as good as done. And so you have that coming out right here in this little phrase, knowing all these things that would come upon him. That's the word oida. John 18, verse 4. And that's what he says. And so therefore he went forward. It's interesting that he went, and that's a literal forwardness. But it's interesting there that knowing all these things, he proceeded. Okay. And he said to them, whom are you seeking? And they answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus said to them, I am he. He is added there, might be italicized in your Bible. And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. The them there is from verse 3. Now, Jesus of Nazareth is the common usage here of Jesus inside of the secular world. He's always called this man of Nazareth. Okay. And you see it in Matthew 21, verse 11, where he's called the prophet from Nazareth of Galilee. Matthew 26, verse 71, which is the parallel passage to this one. Blind Bartimaeus, Mark 10:47, says that he knew it was Jesus of Nazareth. And interestingly enough, normally when a demon looks at somebody, looks at Jesus rather, they will normally issue some kind of, you are the Son of God. I know one time it says, you're the Son of David. But in Mark 1, a demon-possessed individual, the demons shout out and said, you are Jesus of Nazareth. So, that would be who he is. Angels said the same thing. Mark 16, verse 1, which I find that interesting. Why didn't they call him Son of God there? Don't know. But that's what they did anyway. It's probably to identify him more. Showing that this is, there are other Jesuses around. It was a common name, means after the name Joshua, meaning God's my salvation. So it's a common name. So maybe the angels did that to differentiate him from others, perhaps. And Philip did the same thing toward Nathanael in John 1. So him being called Jesus of Nazareth, and interestingly enough, in John's account, in John 19, verse 19, when Pilate put that board over the cross and says, this is King of the Jews, Matthew, Mark, and Luke just have that. Behold, this is King of the Jews. John, though, adds, this is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, which is interesting. Okay, so when you look at that then, and you're noticing what's happening here, is that actually at this point in time, when they answered him, and Christ says to them, I am he, or I am, ego eimi, that's the divine name from Exodus 3:14, when Moses is at the burning bush, and he says, what am I going to tell Israel when I go back? And God in the bush says, you tell them, I am sent you. Exodus 3:14 to 17 there. And so this has been a phrase used very commonly, especially inside the Gospel of John, to emphasize more and more and more the pre-incarnate Jesus and also the deity of Jesus. Okay? So, an interesting thing about this is that at this section, if you look at a parallel verse for verse 5, right here, the other gospel accounts, Matthew 26, actually inserts Judas in here as well, where Judas comes to him, and after he says, who are you seeking? And then Judas will go up in Matthew 26, verse 48. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Immediately he went up to Jesus and he said, greetings, Rabbi, and he kissed him. And so that's right here in this parallel verse. Now, an interesting thing about that, though, is that Judas calls Jesus Rabbi. Now, at the beginning of the ministry of Jesus, that was a very common title used for Jesus, was Rabbi, okay? You don't see anybody else in your Bible other than Jesus and Gamaliel used with the word Rabbi. Okay. You see a lot of other things, but that's a very special thing for Jesus, showing that he is the teacher. Okay. Now, it's interesting, though, is that Jesus in Matthew 23, verses 7 to 8, actually says, don't call any man rabbi. Don't do that. You get rid of that talk. Okay? And that's why one of the reasons why we don't like titles inside the church. Because only one's your teacher, and that's God. Okay? Hey, Nola. Welcome back. All right. And but when you think about this, that only one is your teacher, and that's God. And so he's trying to show you can't call anybody rabbi. And it's interesting then that Judas, when he sees Jesus, he says, greetings, rabbi. Well, why would he do that? What do y'all think? He was there when Jesus gave, that information about don't call any man a rabbi. I think he was there. Why would he then say, greetings, rabbi, do you think? Any guesses?
I'm more curious about why they didn't get back with the golden.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there. So, that's the next section I'm coming to. Don't worry. I got you. Don't worry. That's a good section there, too. All right. Now, it would seem that Judas is going to say that I believe, out of arrogance. He knows you shouldn't do that. He's going to go up there, and his arrogance, he's going to say, here, what you got? Yes. Yes, totally agree. And so even that, no, he sold him for the price of a slave. Back in Zechariah there it says, actually I think it's the price of a donkey. But anyway, he sold him for little or nothing, sold him out. And then he's going to go to him and show incredible disrespect. I think proudness or arrogancy. He's going to really just draw the wedge right there between Jesus and him. And so you see that all right here. Which I just found that very interesting. Okay. So then you notice about the I am. Again, we've already gone into that. Now, here's Craig's. And by the way, there are 29 times that little phrase, ego eimi, or I am, is used in the Gospel of John. That's quite a bit. 29 times. There's only 21 chapters in John, the Gospel of John, and it's used 29 times. So that's quite a bit. Okay. Now, here's Craig's thing right here, verse 6. Now, when he said to them, I am he, they drew back and fell to the ground. And so it's interesting here that when you look at that word fell to the ground, I think it's dealing with how they were blown back, would be my imagery I would get there. But another sister word here is the word to bow. And so if that will be the case, then they're forced to bow when Jesus proclaims, I am. Yeah, Romans 14 there. Yeah. So, it's, I don't know. It's the idea, I think, that they have to acknowledge who he is. Hey, Sister Clemens, good to see you. All right. And when you look at this then, This verse shows an interesting improbability as well, because both those groups who are present, the Jews and the Romans, and even Judas, all those ones are there with the distinct job of trying to arrest Jesus. They're coming in with a sign of force. And we saw that last week about how many there could be there. We don't really know the number. We have some guesses. But, and now they're being forced either on their back or being forced to bow, depending how you want to look at that word, fail. Both things are seen as inside as a soldier. If you fail, it's showing that you have, weakness. You lost your courage. All kind of bad things are associated with falling as a soldier. But yet, right here, God, incarnate, Jesus, is making them do that. Okay? Which is very interesting for them. And in fact, you have this whole thing here that the Romans didn't even need to be involved in this. And when you look at Acts 4 and Acts 5, when Peter and John were arrested, it was without Roman involvement, and only the Jewish authorities carried out the task. And so even them being involved here is very interesting. And verse 7 comes into play here. Then he asked them, and again, whom are you seeking? And then they again say, Jesus of Nazareth. And so he answered, I have told you that I am he. I am. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way. Okay. Now, who are the these there, do you think? Let these go their way. Yeah. All right. The apostles there, let these men go, take me. Okay. And it's interesting here, he uses the conditional little word there of if. They've already said it twice. You kind of feel like, if you seek me, let these men go their way. It's almost as if he's giving them one more chance to not take him. That's how I feel with the word if. If you seek me, after what's just happened, I'll go. But it's interesting there. And that's just because of the word if that's making me think that. But because they've already said twice, we do seek you. And so I think he's trying to extend mercy to them in that little word there. But when you look at this then, and okay. And it's interesting here that in verse number 9, when he says this, it says that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke. Of those whom you gave me, I have lost none. That's a quotation from himself. He fulfills his own prophecy. John 6:39 and John 17, verse 12. Now, how many times have you said something, and whatever you say happens exactly how you thought it was going to happen? Surely, you'd have a few things that might be very close, or you thought it'd be just like this is going to happen. Maybe another detail that you didn't plan on. It's interesting here that this happened exactly how Jesus said it's going to happen. It was all foretold in perfect harmony with what he said before. And this is also a sign of a prophet. And so he's trying to really show them. I think this is more for the Christian here than the Roman and the Jew. I think this little verse is more for the Christian, because that's why we can say you can always trust whatever Christ says. Okay? So, then Simon Peter, verse 10, did the famous act of having a sword, drew it, and struck the high priest's servant. That'd be Malchus. You see that in other parallels and cut off the right ear. And the servant's name was Malchus. There he is right there. And it's interesting here that it is actually unlawful to carry a weapon on a feast day. But Peter had become alarmed at Christ's words about his peril. And actually in Luke 22, verse 38, Jesus allowed them to have 2 swords as a group. And so perhaps this is one of those swords that Jesus allowed his disciples to have. And those, if you ever watch, there's a lot of variations here on this exact incident. Some would say that Peter stole the sword, in his excitement, I guess, or enthusiasm. He went and stole a sword and got it. Some say, he took it from a Roman who was on the front line there. We don't, All that we know is that they had swords on them. From Luke 22, verse 38. Okay? Now, verse number 11 then. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father had given me?" And then we know, because right here it doesn't tell us the next part, but then we know that Jesus will reattach Malchus here and then go on. Okay? Because all we know, if you look at John 18, verse 10, it's only just cut off. Kind of weird, but the other gospel. So he gave it back to him, put it back where it belongs. Verse 12 then, John 18 says, "Then the detachment of troops and the captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus, and they bound him. And they led him away to Annas first, for he was a father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. Now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people." Okay. Now, what do you know about Annas? Annas. Do you know the name of Annas or Caiaphas? What do you know?
Annas is the high priest who illegally executed someone. It was illegal to do that under Roman law.
Yep.
He did not have the authority to execute anyone.
That's true. That's true. And also, my back had a pop, sorry. That's right. And also, if you remember when Jesus went to the temple there and he said, "You shall not make this place den of thieves. They might make my father's house into a house of merchandise." Apparently, according to historical documentation, Annas is the one that really brought in all that stuff. Okay? So Annas brought all that in. All the proceeds from selling things in the temple went to the high priest account. And so he was very well known for being very, very wealthy. And it's one of the undertones here, because you see how the instigators, it seems, kind of show up, is that we always, and you know how when something happens, there's not always just the one motive. When there's ever a problem, it's not always just the one thing. It's always going to be one thing plus the undertone of something else. Now, what they did with Jesus here, and we'll get this, but they're trying to get Jesus on the account that he said, which he did say, that he's going to destroy the temple and raise it up in 3 days. And then that's kind of where they kind of rode that pony into the show there for him. Okay? And that's what we're going to try to push him. We're going to try to get him inside of this illegal trial because of this very thing that he said. It seems, though, that the undertone might be money. if it is in fact the case that that's all beginning, and also you have the prestige already that Christ had. They tried to make him a king earlier in the book. The crowds did, and there was already that going on. But the undertone might be that there was some money that he took out of the temple. And when you mess around somebody's money, now we got a problem. And this guy is all about the money. In fact, he's very well documented as being very, very deceptive, very. Let me read you a few of these things I found here. Extra, free for nothing, extra. Okay. The house of Annas is charged with a special sin, even of whispering and hissing like vipers, which seems to even be the private influence over judges, whereby morals were corrupted and judgment perverted, and the Shekinah withdrawn from Israel. That would be the glory. But when you look at Annas also, he also was one that was head of the chief of the Sanhedrin. He's pretty high up there. And he was one that was forced to leave. Now, the Romans, when they came in and they made changes, he was the one to go. You see in Luke 3, verse 2, him and Caiaphas are in there together. Now he's not. And so that came out there by a Roman named, I'll get to the name here, appointed high priest, AD 6 or 7 by the legate Quirinius, and he was taken out of power by Valerius Gratus. Okay, don't worry about those names. Nothing important there. Well, it is, but not for our discussion. And then Caiaphas was put in. But it's interesting here that he had 5 other sons plus Caiaphas. So all 6 of the following guys after Annas were all his family. Now, it was very unique in of itself that even be the case. So this man has a lot of influence. So of course, he's going to kind of show up. Christ is going after my money. He's causing trouble on the national rhetoric about this temple business. We're going to try to go after him. Caiaphas is perhaps being the mouthpiece of Annas. Either way, they're both working together to try to destroy Jesus here, and they're instigating things. And so that's why you see in verse 14 that Caiaphas is the one who advised the Jews. And he probably did. And he probably did that, but we would also expect that Annas has something to do with that as well. That they both go in together. Got anything?
Wasn't Caiaphas the son-in-law?
Yes. Yes, he was.
And after that incident with Annas, the appointment of the high priest became secular instead of ecclesiastical.
Yes. It is more of what you call a titular state. Yeah, this is more a name-only type thing. Yeah.
So the government appointed the Jews high priest.
Yes, that's right.
Which
But
is very corrupt. That could be more corrupt.
right. And the Jew viewed the high priest kind of like how you and I view a Supreme Court judge. They're always in there until they die. And that's how they view the high priest. He's in there until he dies. So when he's removed, that's why there's some verses here that say he's high priest. And that's from the Jewish mentality, because he can't be removed. But interestingly enough, John does not say that about him right here. So I think John acknowledges him being removed. And he puts Caiaphas as high priest. But you see Luke 3 verse 2 says that they're both high priests, which is very unique. Yeah. All right. Very good. Y'all are smart, man. Y'all know all kind of stuff. Craig.
The writer seems to have perhaps not that good of what's going on in the Jewish.
Yes. And obviously, this is the thing that you have to, I guess, kind of do more extra stuff is to really kind of, also we have the scripture. And scripture is written, though, in a certain context. And, and so sometimes we don't quite read all of the, geopolitical stuff going on behind the scenes and why certain people are involved and, how they got there and stuff. And so you have to go outside of the Bible to find those. And it all matches up anyway. It's all harmonious. Nothing to worry about when you do that stuff. But, and so some of those things I think that we may lose if we don't look a little bit at the background. And so, and that's the thing. And why I'm saying that is like, we don't know. I would assume, it's my speculation here, I would assume that when he was displaced, that would have been a big thing in the Jewish community. Everyone would have known about it. It would have been on the news, I would have imagined. Because if this guy is as corrupt and greedy and power hungry as the background says he is, he's going to make sure that everyone knows about him. I think that would go into his natural personality from what I can see. And then also it's known here. So, I think everyone will know about personally. But again, that's me speculating because we don't know that for a fact. That's me thinking because of the personality that we see here. Okay. Very good. Very good. Now, then you have Caiaphas, and this is a little bit about Caiaphas. Again, father-in-law was Annas, high priest. When Annas was also high priest with Caiaphas, when John the Baptist began to preach, Luke 3, verse 2, Matthew 26, verse 3. He is a member of the Sadducees, was Caiaphas. And after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, the Jewish leaders became alarmed at Jesus' increasing popularity, and the Sanhedrin quickly called a meeting during which Caiaphas called for Christ's death. As high priest, Caiaphas' words carried great authority, and his counsel was followed. John 11, 49 to 53. Subsequently, Caiaphas plotted the arrest of Jesus, Matthew 26, 3 and 4, and was a participant in the illegal trial of Jesus, Matthew 26, verse 57 and following. In fact, the final time you see Caiaphas in your New Testament is when he was at the trial of Peter and John in Acts 4. So he's going to hang around for a little while. I think the normal dates that he was present comes to around the 15-year mark. Okay, he got in around 6, 7 AD, perhaps. And so he's just at the end, his time, but it's right at the end when he's going to begin to cause trouble for the church there in Acts 4 with Peter and John. Okay, now, this little phrase that he says, now it was Caiaphas who advised the Jews, in verse 14 of John 18, it was expedient that one man should die for the people. There's some discussion there inside of the world of academia, whatever you can believe on that and go for it. Don't get too confused. But because a lot of stuff is conflicting on that little section here. Some say that Caiaphas is unknowingly talking about Jesus coming in and dying for all the people. Perhaps. The other side of the aisle says that there actually was a few other times in Jewish literature, okay, not found in your Bible, okay, where when somebody, and the last time it was used actually was referring to a woman who was caught in adultery in Jewish literature, and it says that one woman should die for all people, and that's the idea. And the idea from, if you take that position, was that Jesus and that woman and the others who have had it mentioned were going to be used as examples for these upper echelon guys' power. That they're going to be used as examples. I'll make an example of Christ. So look at what he is. Perhaps. I think either one of those carries some weight to it. And, I probably would lean in the direction of the latter one because, I think that he's really trying to make Christ an example. He's really going to try to push him over the edge. And we know that he does with going to the cross and through the legal trial and everything else. But he's trying to do all that he can to show how powerful he is and how, useless Jesus is. And so I think either one is totally fine. But I personally lean toward the latter one. But anyway. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to get you too.
But I understand his reasoning for wanting to eliminate Jesus because he messing up everything for him.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have the knowledge that that's what Jesus is supposed to do.
Right. And see, and that's why I'm thinking toward the latter side of that, because he's there to try to, he's instigating stuff. He's trying to get this guy off the earth. He's trying to figure out how to get this guy away. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just think, I lean to the first one.
Yeah,
And the
that's
reason
fine too.
The reason I do is, I think it's God's, I don't think humor's the right word for it, but it's God's, this man who was totally corrupt, evil, those words come out of his mouth confirming what God had already confirmed before the foundation of the world.
Correct.
And I think it's a very interesting and ironic thing if it wasn't purposeful.
And it could be kind of like a dual thing there too. He says it, kind of saying it in an ironic sense, and it's kind of being used in kind of both senses. I mean, it's possible too. Yeah. It is interesting that he would say that. Either way, it's why is he going to say that?
That I can say,
Yeah,
answer.
and I think you can really see kind of both points of views. So it's but it very well could be the parallel going on. How he's going to come down for one, which that's why he's here. For everybody, and that's you see all through the Bible. One man's going to put world into sin, Adam, and then second Adam's going to come out and take the world out through obedience. 1 Corinthians 15 there. And Romans 5 as well has more to say about that. But, so you see a lot of that stuff as well. But I don't know. It is interesting to let you kind of churn a little bit there. All right. Now it gets more interesting with this one, okay? Verse 15 to 18. And Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood at the door outside. Then the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to her who kept the door and brought Peter in. Then the servant girl who kept the door said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the servants and officers who had made a fire of coals stood there, but it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. Now, who do you think? We don't know the definitive answer. Okay? Who do you think is this other disciple? That's what I always thought. I always thought it was John. Apparently, there's a lot of talk about that. It could be Nicodemus. Or it could be Nicodemus, or it could be Joseph of Arimathea. Only because, and the only reason why, and you see a lot of this, if you look at any kind of commentaries on this, it's a lot of back and forth on this, okay? The only reason I lean toward it being John. Okay, that's my opinion. I think it's John. But the discussion comes in is how could a fisherman be able to go in and out of an illegal trial so freely? And that's the discussion. Now, my personal opinion is I think it's John, and I think that John comes from a very prominent family. It's a fishing family. He would have been known in different circles. His dad, according to Mark chapter 1, Zebedee, had hired servants. That's a lot of affluence to do that. Okay, you couldn't just go out and find one man. I mean, it's plural. So this man has some money, some prominence there within his circle of commerce. I think it's John, but there are other things that are to consider. We don't know the answer. It could be Nicodemus. It could be just for Arimathea, because they could freely go in and out. And you see how it's kind of like he had to kind of guard Peter a little bit, whereas John, and this is the other side of the aisle now, will likely be there with Peter, not going freely in and out. So that's something for y'all to think about later on. It doesn't change any of the story at all. It's just an interesting side note, okay, that is discussed because it's not actually ever named, okay? Either way, though, the important part of this is where's Peter at? He's outside, okay? Jesus told Peter what? Now you're going to do what? How many times? Before what? How many times is that rooster going to crow? All right, before he crows, third time, you will have denied me 3 times, okay? Now, it's interesting from the Jewish, my time's up. From the Jewish side is that whenever a rooster crows 3 times, the first time is called, in American vernacular, it's called the wake-up call, okay? Second time rooster crows is the call to hasten, okay? Get up, kind of like your alarm clock. For whatever reason, though, inside of a Jewish mentality, when the third time a rooster will crow, for whatever reason they have determined, that's a sign of man's frailty to move. And so that's called the call of a man. I don't know why they do that. But it's interesting that Jesus is going to, I feel like, use a similar imagery and what they already know. And it's really going to happen. This is very historical things here. But it's interesting here that he foresees it happening just as an animal of the field will do this. How crazy is that? Okay? It's not just another person. It's an actual animal. At the right time, he's going to do this. That's very fascinating in of itself. But he's going to do it right at the edge there of Peter being the most frail of all people. Is when that rooster crows 3rd time. Okay? But we're going to stop on verse 15. And so next week, we'll pick up here in verse 16. And we'll go into more on these denials and look more at the words here, because it's very interesting imagery we have here. Okay? But I'm going to stop. And so thank you for being in class today. I appreciate y'all. And we'll have worship here in a few minutes.